Hello again, everybody. My name is John D. Healy. People know me because I produced this book a couple of years ago. Now it's on audio as well. You can buy it on Amazon. It's all the life story of Stoney McGurn, a friend of mine, from 1941 up to a few years ago. I will warn you, it does have some adult content, so beware of that. And I'm also sponsored by Liffey Movers and Liffey Van Lines Moving and Storage Company. They're here in New York City and they've been around as long as Jeopardy, almost 50 years. I always have special guests on this program, and today is no exception. Born in Brooklyn, I had another guest from Brooklyn last week, an architect, but today my guest is Steve Shaiman. Hello, Steve.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
Okay, Steve, we're going to talk swing time music and all that. Tell us, my listeners, where you were born and then how you got into music, swing especially.
Yeah, I was born in Brooklyn, but raised in Queens. Lived in South Jamaica for many years. Grew up there and got into music. Came from a family that loved music and listened to music all the time, both classical music and jazz. And I became a saxophone player in junior high school. So I gravitated towards jazz, being a saxophone player, even though I love classical music as well. But in sort of later junior high school and beginning of high school years, I got sort of bit by the big band bug and really loved the sound of the big band and the orchestrations and especially the classic big band music of the 30s and 40s. So that kind of what got me started in those years, especially in high school. And then in my high school years, I went to Stuyvesant High School when it was still downtown, lower Manhattan on East 15th Street. I was lucky enough to lead the Stuyvesant stage band, which was essentially the jazz band, big band, for 2 years, my junior and senior years. So that's where I sort of started my band leading career in high school, and then went on to lead a student-run big band in college, which became known as Swingtime Big Band. So that's kind of where the name came from. And then after college, when I moved back to New York, I hooked up with a big band that I started playing in the saxophone section in the late 90s. That band was called the Stardusters Big Band, founded and led by a guy called Bob Rotunda from Long Island, who had founded the band actually back in 1972 was the official debut of the band. So our organization as an entity has been going now for 50 years. So that's a real accomplishment that we're very, very proud of.
I was born in Ireland, as a lot of my listeners know, and fortunate enough, I was born in the West Coast, County Mayo, and my parents had an old style ballroom, what you might call the ballroom of romance. So from the age of 6, I was familiar with show bands coming from all over the country. And what fascinated me as a child was the amount of preparation and time they put into setting up, and the sound checks seemed to go on forever. Check, 1, 2, check, 1, 2. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Is that the same today, or has technology improved the whole process of setting up the equipment? Or I know you have to you need Liffey to movers to carry the equipment. But the tuning is what I mean.
As they say, technology is a great thing when it works. And so you still need to take the time before the show starts to make sure everything is working properly and that the levels are set well. So that hasn't, I mean, the technology has certainly improved from the standpoint of sound quality and perhaps ease of setting up and whatnot, but there still needs to be a certain amount of time and attention taken to make sure everything's working correctly and that it does sound good. And then you're still relying on the ears and the fingers of the guy operating the soundboard to make sure that what you're doing comes across well to the audience.
All right, that's very, very interesting. And the only brands I remember from equipment was a brand called Marshall. Are they still around?
Marshall amplifiers, yes. Yeah,
okay,
I'm not that much of a techno wizard when it comes to that kind of stuff. I rely on the sound guys very much to do what they do. But Marshall amplifiers, as far as I know, still around.
So I know a few things, Steve, from reading the bio you sent me. Is not only do you play instruments, but you also sing, I think, and you direct.
Yeah, I don't really sing with the band so much because we have two really fine singers that sing solo with the band. Sometimes I'll sing some background stuff with the band. But my saxophone is my main instrument, and I sometimes do play. But again, I kind of take the role in my band of Cab Calloway, where I just sort of I'm the sort of band leader and personality up in front of the band, and I let the musicians take care of the playing because we have 20 amazing musicians in our band, and I like to shine the spotlight on them as much as possible.
That's what I was going to ask you. How many? So 20. That's quite a
It's a
number.
20-piece band, including myself. Yeah, it's 18 instruments and two singers. So
Okay.
it's a classic full-size big band, which most people these days don't get a chance to hear a full-size band anymore. I mean, because
Well,
of
I
because of
cannot wait to
economics
hear
and
you.
because of space. Sometimes you'll hear a 10-piece band, a 12-piece band, but to hear a full-size 20-piece, big band is rare these days. So people, when they see us, they get really, really excited.
Yeah, we'll come to that in a minute because I'm looking forward to listening to the band. Come, I think you're playing in June on the Upper East Side. We'll get to that in a second.
Yeah.
So, talk to us a little bit about the art of being a director, like training, I guess, or is it just a natural talent?
It's a bit of both. There's certainly a lot of training, a lot of listening. I mean, listening to these classic recordings that we have from the 30s and 40s, and not just 30s and 40s, but certainly 50s, 60s, 70s. There's so much great big band music over the decades. And even though we specialize in recreating 30s and 40s, we play lots of stuff from the 50s, 60s, and 70s as well. Especially in terms of the singers that we do. Things like from Frank Sinatra and Ella Fitzgerald and Peggy Lee and Judy Garland and Doris Day and all these others. There's lots of stuff from the 50s and 60s that we do that's just as great as the stuff from the 30s and 40s. So we try to represent an entire era of swing music and the Great American Songbook because it's classic American music. So the first thing is listening to those recordings and having a really in-depth knowledge of what we're recreating, because we revere these recordings, we listen to them, we try to be as true to them as possible, but at the same time, we're live musicians living in the year 2022. Right. So what excites us is bringing these recordings to life for audiences now to hear in living color, and that's the fun of it for us is to recreate these classic recordings in a way that's true to the original, but somehow gives a little bit of personal stamp to it as well. And I think we're very successful in that. It's something we have a great time doing.
A few weeks back, I had a teacher from Ireland on the program, and she also works for a radio station called Midwest Radio, and their opening theme music is from Glenn Miller, In the Mood.
Oh yeah.
And it's a beautiful music to do the intro. And her name was Mildred Byrne. If someone wants to look up that podcast, and in another few weeks, I'll have another guy, Michael D. McAndrew, who's my nephew from the same station, Midwest Radio. And he won't be talking music, but he'll be dancing about football and a sports commentator. Now, give us some more insight. You have some gigs coming up, I believe, soon.
Yeah, we have. I'm thankful to say we have a very busy summer schedule. In terms of stuff that's closer to the city and within the 5 boroughs. Last year, coming out of the pandemic, we were delighted to be invited to perform for Astoria Park for their annual Independence Fireworks celebration, which traditionally happens at the end of June, leading into July 4th weekend. And they actually do it ahead of the Macy's big fireworks parade. And so we've been invited back. It's just been confirmed. We're going to be playing on Wednesday, June 29th in Astoria Park. Last year, I think we had upwards of about 5,000 people there that were there for the music and the fireworks. We started at 7:30 on Wednesday night, June 29th, praying for great weather, which we had last year. And it was just a great way to come out of the pandemic, to play for a huge crowd like that was just excited to be outside and enjoying live music and enjoying being with other people. So we're hoping for another equally beautiful night this year on Wednesday, June 29th. And then a little bit later in mid-July, we're going to go across the East River. We'll be at Carl Schurz Park, which is right next to Gracie Mansion on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. They have this annual concert series called Summer Sounds, and we're fortunate enough to have been featured on that series for about the last 12, 13 years or so. Obviously, with a break for the last couple of years because of the pandemic, sadly, we couldn't be there. But we are going to be back this year. We're really excited about that. That date is Wednesday, July 20. Wednesday, July 20th, Carl Schurz Park. That's a 7 p.m. start. Right at the top of the stairs, overlooking the East River in Carl Schurz Park, near Gracie Mansion. That's a 7 p.m. start, Wednesday, July 20. That one does have a rain date, but knock wood, we won't need it. We'll be playing on Wednesday night. We've always had beautiful weather there, and we're hoping for the same again.
I'll make sure I'm there for that one, definitely.
That'd be great. We always have a really great crowd there. It's a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, it's beautiful, and the scenery is beautiful as well, and that walk along the river is beautiful too.
Yeah.
As well as the music and all that, I've noted that you have partaken in some theater work. Great Day in Harlem, was that a play or a
Well,
musical?
that was for my the band. Leading the band is kind of my sideline, and my main career has been in the arts management world. You know, working behind the scenes in terms of managing artists, booking shows and projects. So, Great Day in Harlem, actually, the photo right
Oh,
back here
right,
is the photograph in question, the great photograph, Great Day in Harlem.
right,
There was a documentary film made about the taking of this famous photograph,
right.
and that documentary was nominated for an Oscar. Sadly, didn't win, but it was an Oscar-nominated documentary
Mhm.
about an hour long about all the musicians in this photo and how they heard about it, how they got there. It's
Right.
a fascinating documentary, and it's
That's the
called
whole
A Great
story in
Day in
itself,
Harlem.
yeah.
Yeah. So I had seen that film about a year after it was released and after it had been nominated. And I was fortunate enough to meet the filmmaker, a wonderful woman named Jean Bach, an older lady who was very well connected and knew all these musicians and was able to get interview footage with most of them, which ended up being, over the course of making the film, in many cases ended up being the last recorded interview with a lot of these musicians before they passed away. So
Oh,
it was
wow.
kind of, it became a historic document,
That absolutely is, yeah.
unintended, you know.
Yeah, I must check that out.
So I came up with with the idea of a project when I was working for my company that was booking touring shows, of creating an evening where we showed the film as the first act of the
Okay.
show, and then the second act would be some of these musicians who were still alive at the time. There were 8 or 9 musicians still living,
Wow.
and we would want to bring out a few musicians in the second half who were in the film and in the
Wow.
photograph to play a set of music, sort of in tribute to their wonderful colleagues that are in the film. So we were very fortunate to have the great trumpet player Art Farmer, who
Mhm.
is at the very top of the photo there, and
Okay.
was the last image you see in the film itself is Art Farmer
Wow.
talking about the positive message of that, is that even though all these great jazz musicians are no longer with us,
Mhm.
they are still here through their music and through their
Yes.
recordings, and they're still very much alive through
Yes.
that recording, which is a very powerful message. So in the second act of the show, Art himself came out on stage with his quintet and played a set of music in tribute to his colleagues. So it was
Wow.
a really great show. We
Mhm.
did about 3 or 4 tours over the course of 2 years. Sadly, Art got sick the very last tour, so we were fortunate enough to have the wonderful saxophonist Johnny Griffin stepped in as the headliner for the last tour that we did. But it was a very successful event. I'm sorry to say that right now, I think there's only maybe 2 surviving musicians. Benny Golson and Sonny Rollins, I think, are the last 2 from the original photograph. But it's a historic thing, and it was a great project to be involved with.
Coincidentally, Liffey Moving Company, we have been in Harlem for the last almost 50 years now.
All right.
So I always say jokingly, Harlem in harmony.
There you go.
Okay, so
There you
we've got
go.
a talent at Liffey as well.
There you go.
But that's a fantastic story, a great day in Harlem. And I will check up Gene Bach, who you said was the director producer, I
Yeah,
think.
Gene Bach, B-A-C-H,
And
like the composer Bach. Yeah, Gene Bach.
composer Bach, I was about to say, yeah.
Yeah.
Talent is good. Um, extremely interesting. Let me see, what else, Steve, did I not cover? We covered a lot, actually. Let's see, Benny Goodman, other lots of influences in the music.
Yeah, all of the great classic big
Yeah.
band guy. You mentioned Glenn Miller earlier, of course. You know, he's probably the one that most people associate with the big band era, the swing
Sure.
era. But it's certainly not limited to that in any way. We
No.
try to do a whole spectrum of big band leaders. So Glenn Miller, Benny Goodman, Artie Shaw, Tommy Dorsey, Les Brown,
Mhm.
Charlie Barnett, all of the greats that were, you know, thriving during the big band era, and also some of the lesser known ones as well, who people might remember their music, but maybe might not remember them as much
Right.
because they weren't at the Glenn Miller level back in
Right.
the day, or they're not as well remembered
Mhm.
now. But we try to bring forward the greatest of the music to represent
Excellent.
that era, and
Yep.
certainly Count Basie and Duke Ellington, and Jimmy Lunsford, all of those bands as
Okay.
well. You know, we really try to represent the whole spectrum.
Okay. My guest today is Steve Shaiman. He is a swing era talented musician, also a talented director, and a lot to talk about more, and more music coming up in the summertime. And a great day in Harlem, we spoke about that. And when you mentioned some of the lesser known big names, would they be known because of like one hit wonder type of thing?
Yeah, they had some hits, but maybe are not as well remembered as people like Glenn Miller and Benny Goodman, who are probably the top two and had the biggest hits and the most frequent hits. But guys like Charlie Barnett, who obviously his big hit was Cherokee, which was his theme song,
Right.
and had a lot of other big hits as well, Skyliner, Prompton Turnpike, all these other ones. But the average person today who's not as into this music might not recognize his
Like the
name
yeah.
right away. But if they heard the record, they go, "Oh yeah, I've heard that. I know that."
And speaking of that, I noticed something in your bio as well. The movie Fame.
Yeah.
What was your involvement in that?
Well, I was very fortunate enough to study conducting with Jonathan Strasser, who was a teacher and conductor and taught at the High School of Performing Arts in Manhattan, which I did not go there. I was accepted, but I didn't go there. I went to Stuyvesant High School instead. But my sister went to Performing Arts, so she knew Jonathan very well. He was a teacher and mentor of my sister. And so I studied conducting privately with him and also played under his baton in various groups throughout my student years at music camp and various other places. So I was fortunate enough to know him and study conducting with him. And he had a few key scenes in the original movie Fame from 1980, including that final scene where he's actually the last thing you see on the film, cutting off the orchestra at the very last scene of the film. He was a great gentleman, great guy, great musician, taught me a lot.
Good. And you obviously, you extremely or a very good student, maybe the student exceeded the teacher.
I don't know about that, but I try with him and all the other conductors that I've worked under in my career to take a little bit of what they taught me and sort of incorporate it into my style and what I do. I mean, obviously leading a big band, like I said, I referred to Cab Calloway before. It's a little bit more like that. I try to be sort of a showman up in front of the band to try to kind of be in some ways a vehicle for the music visually of what's coming from the band, leading it into the audience. And so people seem to enjoy that. And I also feel very passionate about speaking to the audience in between our songs to give a little bit of context of who the creators were of this music, and not just the musicians who made the recordings, but the composers, the lyricists, and the arrangers, because those very often are the unsung heroes who people don't remember as well. They know who made the hit recordings, but they might not be so familiar with who wrote it, who arranged it, and those things are very important because the arrangers especially are largely responsible for how it sounds, how it comes across on the record. And while you need the musicians, very important to have the musicians to interpret the notes. The notes on the page came from the composers and the arrangers, so we feel very passionately about giving them due credit.
People always behind the scenes are just as important as the people up front.
Absolutely. And I take that cue very liberally from Frank Sinatra, who was really great as a headlining artist, was very passionate about giving due credit to composers, lyricists, and arrangers. If you watch any of his live shows on video or even on audio recordings, you'll always hear him give credit where credit is due in terms of crediting the arrangers. And
the same goes for Jackson Browne.
Yeah,
I mean, he composed an entire song describing about putting it all on the stage.
Yep.
And then at the end, when all the audience have left, the crew have to break it all down again and pack it all up and go. I'm not sure if the song is called "Running on Empty," but we'll figure it out sometime.
Yeah.
Now, how if people want to get in touch about your shows and where they're on? You have a website, I guess?
Yes, and I'm happy to say that in addition to the two concerts we mentioned that are in the 5 boroughs of Manhattan, we've got a number of, we got about 10 or 11 shows just this summer. And people can learn more about that from our website, which is Swingtime NY, like New York.com. So it's Swingtime, all one word, NY.com. Our schedule will be posted there soon. It's not up there yet, but it'll be posted this week. We've got concerts all throughout Long Island. We're based on Long Island. That's our home base. So most of our performances are in Nassau and Suffolk County, but we have those two shows that I mentioned, the one Astoria Park on Wednesday, June 29th, and then Carl Schurz Park on Wednesday, July 20.
Yeah.
We're going to be also at the Music Mountain Festival in Northwest Connecticut, which is a beautiful, beautiful summer music festival where they feature chamber music and jazz. We've been performing there for about 13 consecutive years, so we're delighted to be returning there. That's going to be in late July. And then, like I said, we've got a number of really fun shows in Long Island, Huntington Summer Arts Festival in Heckscher Park in Huntington, also late July. We're going to be at Eisenhower Park in Nassau County, which is a huge venue, the Harry Chapin Lakeside Theater. We've been there many times. So we've got a really fun summer planned. We'd love to see people come out. Many of these are free concerts. Some are ticketed, but many of them are free parks concerts. So just bring a chair and a blanket and a picnic supper, and you'll have a great evening of swing music.
Sure. Steve, thank you so much. You gave us a lot of information.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
My pleasure. As I say, I always have different people on the show from different backgrounds, and they all have a talent to talk about, and they all have a story. And your story is no less than anyone else's. Very interested. Not only to give us one story, you gave us the story of a great day in Harlem as well. A lot of information, because I'm a Harlem fan. So is my sister Rose. She lives in Harlem, and we employ a lot of people in Harlem. Yeah. That's Liffey band lines. So I'm going to dance along, and I'm going to say goodbye to you, Steve.
Thank you so much.
If anybody has questions, they can find me on jhfornews@yahoo.com, and I will pass any questions. If they don't get you, Steve, I'll pass them on to you.
Yeah, swingtimeny.com for ours. Yeah, great.
Okay, now I'll dance along.
Thank you so much. Have a great day. Thank you. Okay, bye-bye now.